Welcome back to the Makers of MidCity Podcast. I'm your host, Clark Dunn.
And I'm Lindsay Patillo-Keen, Executive Director of MidCity District.
And today we have the opportunity to sit down with a local artist here in Huntsville, Asé Selah. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to kind of talk a little bit about your background and your story and some of the art you do here in Huntsville. To kind of get started, tell us a little bit about where you're originally from and your journey to get here to Huntsville.
Yeah, so I usually tell anyone I meet I'm from everywhere. I sort of moved around a lot growing up, but I claim Connecticut because that was one of the hardest times of my life, and I learned most of, life and growing, figuring things out in Connecticut. Originally, I was born in Georgia, so I'm a Southern baby at heart. However, I did a lot of moving back between Bridgeport and New Haven, Connecticut. So, I just say I'm from Connecticut.
And so you came to Huntsville in around 2015 or so when you started school at Oakwood University.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that opportunity to come to Oakwood and what you would ultimately study there.
It's more of like a testimony in a way. My upbringing wasn't as the environments that I was living in at the time wasn't as leveling as anyone else's journey growing up. And so I had a bit of a different experience in life. And so these environments sort of allowed me to look at what precarity is and what it was all about. And so Oakwood was a strange sort of divine alignment in my life. I didn't know anything about Oakwood.
Did you know anything about Huntsville?
Knew nothing about Huntsville.
Okay.
I was really skeptical about the name itself. It sounded, coming from the city, it sounded like a very country, small town. And in Georgia, Valdosta, Georgia, was the area that my family sort of raised me as a child. And so I was really against getting back into a small town. I wanted to be in the big lights and, sort of learn bigger cities. And I had the energy of a fast-paced city. And so I met a friend, and she was going to Oakwood. And so I was like, what is Oakwood? What is that about? And I did some research, and it was a Christian school. And I was in a space in my life where, life was hard. I was working 2 or 3 jobs, trying to figure out how to survive and how to be a man at the time. And, I wanted to really get out of that environment in Connecticut because it was very rough, and I wanted to allow myself to grow old in those particular environments. It's not a common thing for minorities. And so this particular friend was like, man, you could do it, just apply and see what happens. Knowing that I'm an artist at heart, I had to make a decision. And so working all the time didn't allow me to create as much as I would like to. So I needed a change. I needed a change of environment. So I took a leap of faith. And so I knew that I wanted my relationship with God to be stronger. I knew that was the conversation, God was having with me at the time. Like, make a decision. What are you doing? And so I applied, and I got an email like at a strange hour, like 12 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, okay. Check my phone, and it said I was accepted to Oakwood. And so I sold the Ford F-150 I had to pay for my first semester, and I packed a suitcase. I had a suitcase. I used some of that money to get on a Greyhound. I rode the Greyhound. Awesome. And I was dropped off here in Huntsville. I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't have any sort of idea what I was going to do. I didn't have a job. I was trying to figure out pieces as I went, and everything started unfolding in front of me. Like, this is one of those like Lifetime story movies, I feel like, and I probably write a book about it at one point in my life, but that's how I landed in Huntsville.
Yeah. And so as being as creating art and the artistic side that you now could get to, explore even more, is that something that you've always kind of had an itch for, a desire for, or is that something that over the last, few years, it's something you've really kind of dove more into?
Yeah. So a fun fact, most people don't know this about me, but I had a very hard time communicating growing up until maybe 4 or 5, maybe even 6 years old. I dealt with nonverbalism, and the way I expressed myself was through drawing and writing things down. And so my mother poured into me when she saw that I was watching anime on TV and drawing these characters as they moved in still form. And so she started to give me comic books to read. And so started developing a little later in life. And over this sort of continuance of exercising my hand and eye coordination, that sort of allowed me to express what I was creating. And that's how I got into speaking. And so art sort of found itself in my life without me having any knowledge of what it was. It was just a mechanism of how to communicate. And so as life continued to grow, I started to learn and see more. As I continued to grow, art was always at hand, and it was another way for me to express myself a little bit more deeply.
Yeah.
And so it's always been around. I don't think it's ever going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, what was that time at Oakwood like, and that experience you had in Huntsville? I mean, you're in a new school, you're in a new city, you're in a new part of the country. What was that journey like? And is there any moments during that time that stand out among the rest?
It was scary. It was very scary. I felt like a fish out of water, or I felt like a goldfish in a pool full of sharks. You know, it was one of those moments where I had to adapt. I had to learn the lay of the land. I had to take out, I had to really rethink and relearn. And as I networked and became outspoken, allowed people to see who I was, not based off how I looked, I started to see that it was not like that at all in Huntsville at the time that I was here, at least. And so I think my experience was a refreshing experience because I got to see Huntsville in its development stage. Everything started to really kick in gear when I got here. And I was like, man, last year there's been some substantial changes.
Yeah.
Then year after year, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of things happening here.
Oh, for sure.
And so, yeah, I think that my experience was a very enriched experience. I can't speak for everyone, but for me, I think it was the perfect experience to submit yourself into a space or an area where you don't know nothing about,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you finished your time at Oakwood and you begin kind of into the workforce.
Yeah.
Where did your career kind of lead you, and then when did your artist name and kind of come about?
Yeah. I'm really big on research. I love researching, watching documentaries, and so I have a thing with names and labels and how you identify any subject. And it's so fascinating to me that there's dictionaries, encyclopedias, there's things that describe things. I love words. And I thought about my family's lineage and heritage and where do I come from? How did my family, end up in Connecticut? How do I have family in Florida and Georgia? Why are we so scattered? I get the process of moving here to there. And so I was really concerned about generational heirlooms and things of that nature. My family isn't really big on speaking about our heritage. I don't know what that's about, but they don't. And so, I would start asking questions and no one knew these answers. And so I started to really dig into the census. I started traveling. I went to Virginia to look at their database there. They have a facility there where you can look up documents from your family. And so I started seeing a lot of information about my family that was striking. I'm like, man, why don't we talk about these things that have happened in history that we're known for? What is that about? Maybe they don't know. And so that was very alarming for me. And so my hunger to know more about. So I started to do a lot of soul searching. What is right? What is wrong? How do I just denounce something like this? You know what I mean? This was a name given to me.
Yeah.
It's important to someone, but ultimately I have to make a decision for myself. And I was reading the Bible. I was looking through cultural connections through my family's lineage, through the names, through particular locations they moved to. and just certain things I would see in family photographs. I'm like, man, that's West African. What? And so I'm like, oh, okay. And so I was, Asé is Nigerian. And it's a word that stands for manifestation. It's an act of power. And so as you close out a prayer and when you say amen, it has the same sort of connotation with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it also means healer or healing. And, that's what I create for, to heal other people through my work. And I said, man, that's powerful. When you say something like, hey, I'm going to be a millionaire one day, in the culture, you say Asé, like that's a thing to stamp it, to say, yeah, that's going to happen. And the word has a certain frequency. And so when you carry that word after the end of your statement, it's supposed to have this resonance of frequency that carries through the atmosphere. And so I saw that and I'm like, man, I started using the word more and I'm like, wow, I really love this for me. And I want to go by this because I embody everything it means. And so, friends and family members would just call me Asé. I'm like, yeah, that sticks. It has a nice ring to it. You know what? I'm going to, own that. And so going through the Bible and reading and going through scripture, I would start seeing Selah a lot. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? So I would read up on it and it was a closing of like, so be it. So that was the definition, or that is the definition of it. And so I said, it's like the period of a sentence, and I put the two together. Of course, I did some research on if it was already copywritten and trademarked and stuff. So you know what? This is not a word that is in the database. So let me go ahead and create an LLC.
There you go.
Let me go ahead and just do that and go by this new name. And so I prematurely started thinking about, or unconsciously started thinking about what it means to reclaim something or deconstruct and reconstruct the self. And that was the first introduction to what I'm doing today currently in my work. And yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about you taking your creativity and then displaying it? I think, you understanding your creativity and your family and your friends understanding it, but then you displaying it to the world.
Yeah.
How was that first initial moment? And did that happen here in Huntsville when you first started really showing your work to the general public?
I started in the neighborhoods of Connecticut and New Haven. I was just very frustrated with education, poor education system. I mean, no offense to New Haven. At the time, it was terrible. I wasn't, I didn't like what I saw. There's Yale there, but once you go past Yale, once you hit, you go past Broadway, you just have neighborhoods that are just in poor conditions. And I had to walk through that to get home. And I'm like, man, something has to give, and I had to make money. I had to figure out what I wanted to do. And so I started to engage into abstract expressionist work at the time. And so I would create these works on the street. I didn't want to be labeled a street artist, but I had to do what I had to do. I had to make money. And so I thought my business mindset started to kick in. So I would leave my neighborhood, go down to Yale and Broadway, and I would do live art. And I would get these massive mattresses, headboards, big pieces of wood that these rich students would throw out. And I would take those and set up. I had a makeshift easel that I made. I would set up on the street. And journalists at the time that were in Yale would come up and interview me about my work. And so I started to talk about it and my name started to spread through the city. And then from there, I started to sell the work. And that was my first introduction to sort of showing it to people and seeing their interaction with the work and like their need of, I want this. And I never felt that want in that particular intensity before. And that was what really made me fall in love with sort of displaying the work. And so from there, I started to look into what it means to show my work into a gallery setting.
Yeah. And so what was that? So like you obviously had the experience of showcasing your work in Connecticut, and then you come to Alabama, you come to Huntsville. What was that? Was that response that you were seeing in Connecticut from the general public, something that kind of translated pretty well over to Huntsville with the general public here, or and then what ways did you find in Huntsville to broadcast and showcase your work?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was very different. I think that the Huntsville now is a different Huntsville years ago. There weren't really any galleries here. There weren't any opportunities to really present your work in settings. And so that was a bit frustrating. During my time at Oakwood, and those who know me from Oakwood knew me from being the artist, aside from the career I took up. And I would just find spaces, like I would go to the public libraries in town and just sort of talk to the librarians and say, hey, I would really love to showcase the art here. Let me put up some art around the library. And I would do that at Oakwood as well. And I would do seasonal shows where I would present mini exhibitions and things of that nature, and mini installations of clothing or fabrics that I would sort of put together in my dorm room. And they would allow me to do it, and I would sell some works to the professors, and that's how I was able to get through my semesters and pay for tuition. And here in Huntsville at the time, I had to really think creatively, how do I create spaces for people to engage with the art, actually want to purchase the art rather than going to like a Marshall's or a Target, those sorts of environments. And I'm like, well, where are all the local artists? I know they're here, but where are they? And I found that most of the artists here, they were showing in like Nashville and all these other surrounding cities. I'm like, well, we have a problem here. So how can I help, or how can I engage in creating a space that would present these things? And, I never really at the time got to that answer. Life got in the way, school was in the way, and then galleries started to submerge. And so that was very delightful to see.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I would say one of the biggest displays of your art is here at MidCity. Talk a little bit about sort of your introduction and your, getting to know Lindsay and the team at RCP and the team at MidCity and the camp, and a little bit about that art installation you have here.
During that time, I'm trying to figure out, I'm thinking.
Bit of a blur, can be,
Yeah, it happened. It seems like so long ago, right?
I think I saw your work and just knew that of the talent that you had, and you were able to do big scale.
Yeah.
And that's something that we were certainly interested in, and on the mural standpoint.
Yeah. I know you reached out to me, and we met at a separate occasion before. And from that particular interaction, Lindsay provided me with an opportunity to create one of my biggest murals to date. And she trusted my creativity. Thank you. She trusted that the work that I was doing was valuable, and she paid me a good price, and most places don't do that. You know what I mean? So that really meant a lot to me, being valued at that level and not being treated as, just a hobbyist. You know what I mean? Okay. And so it was it was a heartfelt moment for me during the entire process of the mural, because I'm very big on community. I want people to come together, enjoy art. And I love that Huntsville is really embracing that now. And so during the time of me creating Unity is Love, I wanted to talk about, because I did research on Huntsville as well, because I was so afraid of being in a situation where I was victimized for something. And there was, there's some history about Huntsville, like every other city. And I said, man, let's sort of change the narrative. How could we do that? And I knew just by the people that I met in MidCity, involved with MidCity, they had this sort of radiant energy of positivity, community, love, togetherness. And I said, I need to create something that really, reflects that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk about the sort of melting pot of all these cultures here and sort of encourage more ethnicities to be here, because that is what makes a strong city possible. And I had a vision of these hands being raised in terms of like asking for permission. And I thought about multicolored hands, not in a particular way where it sort of identified a specific race. I wanted to pull back the racial aspect and give these figures different colors that we can all relate to. We all have a favorite color. We all identify ourselves with particular colors. We dress based on a color. Advertisement is everywhere based off color. And so I knew that color would be very important based off color psychology. And so what other way to bring people together than love? And so I use love as a mechanism to talk about how we all experience it that makes us all the same in certain ways. And so I put the heart in the palm to sort of signify that is the root of who we are as individuals. And it's okay to give yourself permission to love each other, love ourselves. And so I sort of staggered them in a way where it gave a landscape of a cityscape. And from there, I put the words in the biggest sort of font, like an impact font of unity. And then I put is with the heart surrounding it, and then love at the bottom. And so I wanted to keep it sort of true to myself, coming from an urban city. Bridgeport is full of graffiti everywhere. And so I wanted to have some sort of tastefulness when it comes down to graffiti. I didn't want it to feel classless. I wanted graffiti to have a bit of commerciality to it. And so I kind of cleaned it up a bit to make it very receivable. And from there, I completed the mural, received a great response from it. And I love looking at it every time I drive by. So, yeah.
Very well photographed too.
Yeah.
And we love that Asé brought his story that we've heard sitting here to that mural, rather than us and me and our team saying, we really want to have a, some type of star theme or rocket theme or music or whatever theme. It's like we toss out a few adjectives and let the artist interpret that with their story. And his style is so prominent in that mural too, that we just love that you have a hand in that. And it's not just a MidCity mural. It's a you mural. Your style shines through in it, rather than us kind of identifying the style and you meeting us where we are. We meet you where you are. And I that's what makes an artist so special, is that they have such a signature with a story. And he's told that here at MidCity. We're so lucky to have that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And from that mural, I mean, in the last couple of years, you've gone full time into being an artist, correct?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that transition, and then as well as some of the things you're doing with the nonprofit you have to kind of educate and teach youth through art.
Yeah. So, oh man, it's been a journey. A great
real
journey.
Quick, actually, I think a lot of people have the creativity that you have, but are nervous to do what you have done. So talking about how you went from a 9 to 5 and that leap, because a lot of people in Huntsville 100%. Have that. And it's a big deal.
Yeah. Let's see. Where do I start? First, I would like to say, trust your gut. And always, 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 if your heart is not 100% in it, do not act. You have to be certain. You have to be confident. You have to be sure. Because if any other thought creeps in, if the doubt creeps in, it's going to taint your entire process. And I went from being a full-time artist to grabbing a 9 to 5 to being full-time, back and forth, staggering, trying to figure out, is this right for me? Is it not? I dealt with the self-doubt. I know what imposter syndrome is about. I know it all too well. And so for my experience, I would say that it was a little bit different for me as to why I chose to get a 9 to 5 and why I chose to leave a 9 to 5. My original introduction into becoming a full-time artist at the time, I was working at Walmart. I was working at a jewelry store. I was doing anything I could do to make rent, pay tuition. And so from there, I realized that once I started, let me slow down because I know there's some people that are artists that are listening to this. Learn the business side of the art industry. And at some point, you're going to reach a glass ceiling. It's going to happen. You're going to realize certain doors aren't going to open until you reach a certain status. If you don't have a certain amount of credentials, you're not going to have access to certain things, but don't let that be a disparity. Allow it to encourage you, empower you to move on to the next challenge. And so for me, I love a challenge. My life has always been about a challenge. And so for me to figure out how to get through that was what pushed me and motivated me to get to the next step. And so when I decided to leave my 9-to-5 and I was doing exhibitions, I started to get a question about, well, are you represented by anyone? That was the next question. I'm like, what do you mean represented by someone? What are you talking about? And so I had to do more homework. I had to do more research. And then I realized, wow, I got to go to school. I need to go back to school. And I had quite a few mentors at the time helping me through my way. And they were asking me like, listen, you got to make a decision, bro. What are you going to do? Are you going to continue to be a folk artist? Or are you going to go and get your master's? Like, only you can decide. And either way, no one has to say what's right or wrong, but if you want to hold a particular status or have a particular value in your art, sure, you can make thousands of dollars. The internet is here. You can make a living posting your work online and people will buy it. When you're talking about the industry, there's a different machine that you have to operate within or around. And I didn't know that. And so I started to get that question a lot. And so I had to go back to a 9-to-5. Started teaching with Huntsville City Schools, doing that for a while. And so there's nothing wrong with having a 9-to-5 if that's what's going to help you, because art materials isn't cheap. I pay a lot of money on my materials. So it's very necessary to have that to support what you're trying to do. Just be strategic. And so from there, I realized that I needed to go back to school. And so I applied. I was encouraged to apply to the top school in the country. It's very debatable. I know that Yale and School of the Art Institute in Chicago, they go back and forth for the #1 spot almost every year. And so I had to make a decision. And so I did apply and I got accepted into that program. And I'm currently in the program now. I have one more year and I'll have my master's in fine arts. And it's been a journey. But back to just knowing your worth, knowing how you value yourself, knowing what matters the most to you. If you don't care to go to school, then do what works for you. Be the influencer. Find your niche and own it. Master it. Just go for it. The critics are always going to have something to say. You're not going to be able to please everyone. So just keep in mind that someone is going to say something that's going to contradict what you're doing. You just need to be able to defend what you're doing. Yeah. And that's what matters the most. Take the paper away, take the programs away. Are you able to defend your work in a tasteful way? That's what really it ultimately boils down to. And so for me, moving forward, I knew that I wanted to be in spaces that held this certain prestige. And I knew I wanted to create work that aligned with that particular label, back at labels. And that was a big hurdle for me because I had to unlearn everything I knew about art. Stop me here.
But it's speaking of spaces too, like you have now become a gallerist.
Yes.
So you are creating the environment now that you wanted yourself to be in.
Yes.
So rather than you waiting for the environment, now you're the creator of that environment, and you're the creator of that for other artists.
Yeah.
Can you talk about starting the gallery, and now you're in your 3rd year of doing this, and I'd love to know more about that and your exploration of that.
Yeah, and I'll tie in how the kids are involved in everything with the nonprofit, because So I applied to school, got into school. At the same time, I knew I wanted to do more. I'm more of the, I think big, I think bigger than reality sometimes. And during the time, Gallery 111 was one of the hottest galleries in Huntsville. And everyone was going there or they were going to the little green store to get exposure. And it hurt my heart when Gallery 111 closed, because then I felt like I had to start over in Huntsville to sort of get some sort of exposure. And everyone was going to this space, every walk of life. It was beautiful. And I said, man, we need a space. It's detrimental to the art scene here. It doesn't make sense that people can't find quality local artists in the city. They have to go elsewhere. And so I said, I don't have the money to do it, but I'm going to figure it out. And so I didn't have a team. It was just myself. I knew I wanted to create something that anyone could relate to. And back to words, curated was something that stood out to me. And I always knew that I wanted to put things together and present them, artists, And I'm like, okay, the definition of curated embodies that. I said, wow, let me look and see if this is taken. Searching online, looking at the database at US PTO to see if it's taken in the trademark database and the copyright database, and it wasn't operative. And I said, okay, let me see if I can create a business from this. And to Curated Gallery, I created the name. I said, now I need a team. So I started to go to MidCity a lot. And I was going to the camp quite often. And people from the community knew I was an artist, so they would reach out to me like, hey, could you do live paintings at this event, at this show that we're doing? So sure. I wasn't a fan of doing live pieces at the time because of like, I would get very nervous. I want to complete it. I don't want to look a fool, but I pushed myself through. And from there, I was able to meet other people doing other things like flea markets and such. And then I got exposed to different crowds of people. And from there, I started to meet individuals who carried themselves, and I was able to see the work that they were doing and building relationships and friendships with individuals. And then I started slowly creating a team over time and sharing my ideas, and everything started to make sense. So from there, I knew that capital was king, and locking yourself into retail or like a particular space not always means a positive thing if you don't have the knowledge or means to stay consistent and have consistent cash flow coming into a space. I knew that I didn't have that yet. And so I wanted to create a model that was very fresh, very demanding. And I knew that a pop-up sort of model was very lucrative. I saw that in New York. I saw that in Connecticut. I saw that in Miami. I saw that in LA. I saw that in all these places that I would travel to. And I said, what would it mean to have a pop-up aesthetic gallery? And let me just figure out how to create contracts. I had to figure it out, everything from scratch. And so I learned the business side of that. And so I said, let me learn how to develop these relationships with these places and gain more foot traffic to these spaces. Businesses want people there. That's how they make money. I said, well, how can I add value to these spaces? And so I put the team together. I said, we need to figure out how to bring people to them and also educate them on art. And so from there, we created our system, and we had our first show downtown Huntsville at a storage unit downtown. And we used that facility as our flagship location. So we just recreated these spaces, and we will hop around the city and we will find spaces that were very unconventional. It doesn't look like a gallery. It's not supposed to be a gallery, but we wanted to put our heads together to figure out how do we turn this normal space into a space where people can have their first interaction with art, because most people don't know how to approach art. They don't know much about it. Why do I need to buy this? Why should I buy this? What's the value in it? Is there value at all? What's the meaning? Does it need to have meaning? So we wanted people to understand what it was about. And so from there, I knew personally my love and my growth for art happened in the school system. A lot of times in class, I would doodle on papers, and I would sort of just outshine inside of the art room. And most of my core classes, my math, reading, they would, hey, you finish your assignment, would you like to go to the art room and sort of take the last 15 minutes of class and go create something? They were supportive. And I would run to the art room, literally sprint, and I would have these side quests, assignments from the art teachers, and they would put my work into competitions. And I landed an opportunity to get into this program called CCY, and where we would spend a summer at Wesleyan University. And I spent time there learning, and I was amongst the best artists in the region. And so I learned to develop my skills at a youth. And so I said, man, what else can I do? Shortly after that, I landed a fellowship opportunity. I was in a fellowship program with this particular organization called Arts and Ideas Festival in New Haven, where I was working under Lupita Nyong'o, an actress. You may have seen her in Wakanda and all this. I was working underneath her, and she wasn't famous at the time. She was going to Yale, but that was what opened my eyes to anything is possible. I was able to see the structure of how to build a business, and other students and kids around me were learning. And I said, man, this is rich. I need to create something like that. So moving forward to today with the gallery, I wanted to create opportunities for kids. And in working through Huntsville City Schools, I'm seeing the same thing. Kids who are excelling in the art room now can utilize the same concepts into their other core classes. And so I said to myself, man, what does it look like to create a nonprofit called the Arts Leadership Program, where these kids can have the same exposure I did in Connecticut? And so it's been a long time coming, piecing this program together. I have my first few students where I'm doing these art lessons that I mentioned earlier, and doing these sort of conceptual classes where they're able to use these prompts and concepts to create art pieces and installations. And when I have these exhibitions, I'm creating spaces for these kids to showcase their work and write about it and allow other people to give them the support that they need. Because let's be real, a lot of these students don't have that support in their environment or at home in many cases. Art isn't seen as a real thing for certain homes. It's more about engineering. It's more about being a doctor, a lawyer. And I think that none of these things would be possible without art. You have to have the sketch work. You have to have architecture, the layout plan, all of these things. And so I'm saying, how do we create more respect for this avenue? And so to just sort of full surface this question, I'm really, really passionate about working with kids because I know the things I had to experience. I know what I see now, and I know what the aftermath looks like when they create something and they're proud of it and they're able to show it. And then they see people looking at the work. And then oftentimes you might get a collector that I might know, hey, this student's work is great. Can you see if their parent can give them permission and I can buy this? And then that changes their whole mind frame. Like, what? I can sell my work. I'm still in school, so that's just changing the narrative. And that was very important for me. And so as I continue to grow and as I continue to get through my master's degree to learn curatorial practices and sharpening my skill set of knowing how to present work, how to be a gallerist, how to look for talent outside of the region. It's been a wonderful thing. Like, we just locked in our first international artist from West Africa, and he reached out to us because our marketing, our SEO has been killing it. And so I'm like, wow, this is amazing. This is bigger than life for me now because I didn't expect to have an international artist until maybe 5 years from now. But it's happening now. And I'm like, wow, so anything is possible. Everything is possible. And that's been the journey of being a gallerist and an artist.
And so I think to kind of finish off this conversation, I would love to get your perspective. It seems like you have your hand in so many different things, and you're incredibly talented at the things you're doing, and the impact you're going to have is going to be insane. As we're sitting here, and we were talking a little bit about it off air whenever you got here, but your biggest, like you said, the biggest art installation you have is at MidCity. MidCity is continuing to grow, and they're finding ways to engage with local artists of the region, of the area, and incorporating that into the design elements of MidCity. What would you like to see as an artist that has your pieces here at MidCity for the future of MidCity?
More galleries. More galleries. North Huntsville. I know MidCity's coming. I can feel it. Downtown. Districts. When I go to different cities, and when me and my team go to these cities, we see that most cities are operated in districts. Let's take like a New York. We have the fashion district. We have the art district. We have all these other spaces that things are sort of blocked into sections. So when people come into Huntsville, as known as the number one city, we can still say we're number one, but it will make things a lot easier for people to know where things are, and specifically with the arts. More residency programs. We need more residency programs. I'm working on a project now where we're going to build out a residency program through the gallery. However, there needs to be, just like there needs to be multiple galleries to create more value and demand for the art here, there needs to be more residency programs for the arts here, because that's going to strengthen the capital here for the art. And so more installations, more live performances, more live art in outside spaces, not just in buildings. We have music, but in terms of the visual arts, there's so many artists here, which is mind-blowing, and they want the opportunities. And oftentimes we see that new artists don't get the exposure because they're new, but how are they going to get the exposure if the opportunity doesn't align? It's one of those things where we have to educate new artists on how to be an artist, because most times they get very discouraged because the opportunity has these sort of requirements and it sort of stifles their journey. And so they either give up on their path, or they either move to Atlanta or Nashville or somewhere else where it's a bit more accessible for them to get an opportunity into the arts. And just seeing more community-based art, maybe programs, performances, things like that is really going to allow the charm to heighten in this city. And as I work to help to shape these things, I want other businesses, other entities to maybe create spaces for it, support it. And the sky's the limit. I think that we're on the right path, though. The things that I'm saying now, I think that it's already sort of happening, but just, I don't know how to put this in the right words. Just going for it. I think a lot of what I'm seeing now is waiting for the right time. A lot of these businesses, when I go in and I speak and I sort of introduce myself, we were talking about that. We were thinking about it. And they, it's that. And it's like the time is now, because everything is happening now in Huntsville and all eyes are on Huntsville. So just go for it. Just do it. Yeah. So that's what I would say.
Love that.
That's
just
it.
More. We need more fostering of education, more areas to paint, more areas to grow.
That's
more community-based art.
And I think it's a testament just with the space that we're obviously at MidCity, just the way that art can use to connect the places. Like, though you have, and you alluded to it a lot in the conversation so far, but just the ways in which you can have multiple entities that are operating within this space of MidCity, but there's this piece of art or this, like structure that's built, that's painted by artists, or in the smallest details often make the biggest impact. And so it's interesting just to see how that's been able to incorporate it. So the future, I think, is bright. I think it's exciting. I've enjoyed having you on. It's been fun to kind of learn more about the work you do and your passion for it. We'll have all your information in the notes. So if anyone's listening or watching and they want to find out more information about any of this stuff that we've talked about, they can definitely visit that. But I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor. I love what MidCity is doing. I think I'm going to say it. Y'all are leading it right now with the arts. So kudos to y'all. And thank you for always thinking of me. Like, it's a true honor. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.